Hey everyone, welcome back, and thank you for taking a few minutes to be here today, because what we're talking about right now is something that a lot of Americans are watching very closely. There's been a growing amount of discussion, speculation, and renewed attention around this proposed $2,000 payment, whether you want to call it a stimulus check, a dividend, a rebate, or a distribution. The name honestly doesn't matter. What matters is who could qualify, when it could actually happen, and why so many people are suddenly talking about it again here in early 2026. According to the article I want to break down with you today, roughly 58% of the American population could potentially be included for this new $2,000 payment. That's a huge number, and it immediately raises questions. Who exactly makes up that 58%? And just as importantly, who falls into the remaining 42% that would not be included? The article does a really good job of highlighting this, and it also pulls in some key remarks from high-profile figures inside the administration, including Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent, who has publicly talked about income thresholds and how eligibility could be determined. What makes this especially interesting is that this conversation isn't happening in a vacuum. Americans are still dealing with rising costs, higher prices on essentials, and a lot of uncertainty about income, retirement security, and fixed benefits. So when a $2,000 payment gets mentioned, people understandably want clarity. They want to know if this is real, if it's actually coming in 2026, and if they personally would qualify. We've been hearing about this $2,000 payment for months now, and one of the biggest points of confusion has been eligibility. People keep asking whether it depends on working, filing taxes, being retired, receiving Social Security, or living on fixed income benefits. And this is where I want to slow things down and make something very clear. Because this has been consistent throughout all previous stimulus-style payments. It always comes down to income, not employment status, not whether you're retired, not whether you file a tax return every year. It's about your income in relation to whatever threshold the government sets. That's why this article is so important. It digs into the idea that income thresholds are likely the deciding factor, and it connects that idea directly to what Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent has already said publicly. Back in early November of 2025, just days after the president floated the idea of a $2,000 dividend-style payment for Americans, Scott Bessent went on record in an interview and mentioned that income thresholds would likely be under $100,000. That single comment has been referenced again and again, and this article brings it back into focus. Now, the article itself points out something that might sound confusing at first. It mentions that about 42% of the population would not be included. Some people see that number and immediately think, wait a minute, that doesn't match what you're saying. But here's the key distinction. Instead of focusing on who's excluded, the article reframes it by saying that roughly 58% of Americans would be included. Same data, different perspective, and frankly, most people care more about whether they're in than whether someone else is out. According to Census Bureau data referenced in the article, about 42% of households earned over $100,000 in 2025. That number surprises a lot of people because it feels high. But this is where things get tricky, and this is where a lot of confusion starts to creep in. Census data is based on households, not individual tax returns, and that difference matters a lot. Household income and tax return income are not the same thing. A household can include multiple adults, multiple earners, and multiple tax filers. But when stimulus or dividend-style payments are distributed, they are not based on total household income in most cases. They're based on how income would be reported on a federal tax return, whether someone files or not. Let me give you an example to make this crystal clear. Imagine a household with 6 or 7 people living under one roof. They're all adults, except maybe one minor. All the adults are working. Collectively, that household could easily earn more than $100,000 per year. On paper, as a household, they would look like high earners. But that doesn't mean each individual earns anywhere close to that amount. In this example, you might have parents in their mid-60s who file a joint return together. Then you might have adult children in their late 20s, early 30s, or mid-30s who each file their own individual tax returns. None of those individuals might earn more than $100,000 on their own. In fact, they could all be well below common stimulus thresholds. So even though the household income looks high, each person's individual income would still qualify. That's why it's misleading to focus too heavily on household income statistics when we're talking about potential payments like this. The government doesn't look at a house and say, okay, everyone in this building is disqualified. They look at individuals and married couples based on income reporting standards. Now, some people hear this and think there's a contradiction. At the beginning of the conversation, you hear that filing a tax return doesn't matter, and then later, tax returns are mentioned again. Here's how both of those things can be true at the same time. You do not need to file a tax return to be eligible for these types of payments. That has been true in the past, and it's likely to remain true. However, eligibility is still based on income, as if it were reported on a tax return. Whether you file or not, the IRS and the Treasury already have records of your income. Employers report wages. Benefit administrators report payments. Banks report interest. The system already knows how much money you receive. Filing a return simply organizes that information, but the information exists either way. So when this article talks about income thresholds, it's not saying you must file taxes to qualify. It's saying eligibility is determined by income levels consistent with tax reporting rules. That's an important distinction, especially for people living on fixed incomes, Social Security, SSI, SSDI, or retirement benefits. This brings us back to the big question everyone is asking. Is this $2,000 payment actually coming in 2026? And if so, when? As of right now, there is no official proposal released. That's the honest truth. What we have are statements, interviews, and signals from key figures inside the administration. Those signals matter, but they are not final policy. In late December of 2025, White House economic advisor Kevin Hassett stated in an interview that he anticipated an official proposal coming out early in 2026. That comment alone is why so many people are watching this closely right now. We are officially in early 2026, which means the window he referenced is open. Does that guarantee anything? No. But it does mean the conversation is active, and it does mean we could see movement sooner rather than later. When an official proposal does come out, it will answer a lot of questions at once. It will tell us the exact income thresholds, whether payments are phased out, how distribution would work, and who is officially included. Based on past stimulus payments, there is a strong pattern. Historically, income thresholds have been around $75,000 per year for individuals and $150,000 per year for married couples filing jointly. That doesn't mean those numbers will be used again, but they are a very common reference point. Scott Bessent's comment about incomes under $100,000 may simply be a rough placeholder rather than a finalized number. If you're trying to figure out whether you might qualify, the easiest way to think about it is this: ignore everything else and focus on income. If you're an individual, ask yourself whether your annual income is below roughly $75,000. If you're a married couple filing jointly, ask whether your combined income is below roughly $150,000. That's it. You don't need to factor in whether you're working, retired, disabled, or living on benefits. Income is the key variable. It's also important to remember that nothing is final yet. These numbers could change, they could be lower, they could include phase-outs. The final proposal, when it comes, will tell us exactly how this works. Until then, everything is based on patterns, statements, and educated expectations. One thing the article does very well is highlight how misleading surface-level statistics can be. When people hear that 42% of Americans earn over $100,000, it sounds like a huge portion of the population would be excluded. But when you dig deeper and understand how income is actually measured and applied, it becomes clear that far more people could qualify than initially assumed. This is especially relevant for seniors and people on fixed incomes. Many people receiving Social Security, Medicare, or retirement benefits worry that they'll be excluded simply because they don't work or don't file taxes every year. Historically, that has not been the case. These payments are designed to be income-based, not employment-based. As we move further into 2026, the next major milestone will be the release of an official proposal. That document will change everything overnight. It will turn speculation into specifics. It will give clear numbers, timelines, and rules. And once that happens, there will be no more guessing. Until then, the most important thing you can do is stay informed, understand how income thresholds work, and not get caught up in misinformation. A lot of noise gets generated around these topics, and not all of it is helpful. If you are on Medicare and you ever feel unsure about your coverage, your options, or whether you're on the right plan for your needs, there is free help available. Many people don't realize how much money they could save by reviewing their coverage, and getting guidance can make a real difference, especially on a fixed income. As always, I appreciate you being here and taking the time to watch and listen. If this breakdown helped you understand the situation better, make sure to share this video so others can get the same clarity. And if you're new here, don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss future updates as soon as official information is released. Thanks again for being here, take care, and I'll catch you again in the next one.